Welcome everyone. I think we are seeing around 15 participants. Thanks for joining in. Give us a couple of minutes time. We've got overwhelming registrations. I think we would like to wait for a couple of minutes till some more join in. Just be there. Thank you guys for joining in. We see 31 participants. Give us a minute's time. And thanks for joining in just on time. This really helps us get started. But since we got overwhelming responses, we would like to wait for another minute and give people the opportunity to join and listen to the conversation live. One more minute and we'll get started. Welcome, welcome. Just hang on for just one more minute and we'll get started. So it's 4:02. As promised, we have close to 33 participants. We are getting started and we'll welcome others as they join in. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on which part of the world you have joined us from. And really a warm welcome because thanks for being here and spending the next 60 minutes with us, having conversation on a topic which is now the most relevant, most researched and discussed around the world. So it makes you are utilizing your time the best. So the last couple of months, we have seen the world change in the way we operate. And that's been phenomenal. In our lifetimes and maybe in our parents' lifetimes, we haven't experienced something like this. We are all sitting together, logged into a Zoom, and the technology consumption has increased multi-folds. Let's take example of Zoom. So, before COVID, they had 10 million subscriptions, and now it is more than 200 million. Now that's whooping scaling in just a couple of months. But among all these that's happening around the world, what's prevalent and becoming dominant is how each one across the world are collaborating, co-creating to ensure they're making lives of humans much better and efficient. So in everything that we are doing, humanity, empathy, and resilience is really taking a stride. And that's really, really something that we would love to see. We're all going back to the basics of human-centered design thinking wrapped with technology. Now, digital transformation is a phenomenon that we have been listening to for last 1 decade, loosely in pockets and in industries. There was a recent study that I was reading done jointly by MIT Sloan and Deloitte, where a lot of CXOs across the world were interviewed. And the result says that 90% of CXOs believe that digital economy will impact their industry. Nevertheless, less than 15% of them have put together a digital strategy and started executing. But friends, COVID did not give us any scope. It just came in and we had to adjust everything around COVID. And now organizations are enforced to rethink and follow the path of the design, which is digital, develop digital, and deliver digital. In fact, while I was reading the article by all the panelists and authors here who will talk to you and you'll come here to listen to them, I love the way they have summarized that entire article and talked about 3 key drivers that's going to lead our lives and businesses after COVID. One is digital adoption, health and wellness, and resilience and innovation. Let's not do a further ado and get started. In all this excitement, I missed to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Mahua Mukherjee. I'm the co-founder of The Star in Me. It is a continuous learning and a global career advancement platform for women professionals. And we are also a diversity partner for organizations. The reason I'm super excited because of two reasons. One, while everything was happening around COVID and we were showing our emotions across social media channels on WhatsApp, telling what can happen, what are the thoughts. Now, this bunch of 7 professionals who come from absolutely different industries, geographically dispersed, in fact, across the border, we have our friends from Berlin and Stockholm also, comes together and puts their thought constructively and publishes a paper on LinkedIn. And that's exactly the reason why we are all here. So kudos to all of you to bring this comprehensive study and article. And the second reason why I'm excited and proud because they are my batchmates. We did our MBA together in Indian School of Business. All right, so let's get started with today's first panelist and speaker and author, Pavanjit Singh. Pavanjit is the CEO of Ranzar Consulting. It's an innovation and growth strategy consulting firm based in New Delhi. He has over 2 decades of experience in the food retail industry. Pavanjit, I read the article and really the statistics you have given are kind of profound. So in the restaurant industry has been one of the hardest hit sectors because of the lockdowns. And frankly, now if I have to think about going out and eating, it kind of looks far-fetched. How do you see the recovery of this industry? And what does the future of the restaurant industry look like after COVID?
All right. Um, First of all, I'd just like to say a word of thanks to Basecamp firstly for hosting the webinar, and also to all my fellow authors for the time that they have devoted. Like you said, it was something which was done across boundaries, so it's took a lot of time and effort. To come to what you just asked, see, the restaurant industry definitely has been one of the hardest impacted sort of sectors of the Indian economy. And unfortunately, it's been two sides to this entire situation. The first side of it is that dine-in has been completely blocked as an option for all of them, right? So immediately there was an impact of about 70 to 80% in terms of the revenues. And what that also led to was the fact that there was a lot of wastage. So all the food stock which was there inside the restaurants and the food stock which was there in the supply chain, all of that had to be wasted, right? But there's also going to be a long-term impact, and I think we're already starting to hear some sort of murmuring on that in terms of how soon can dine-in come back online. And I think the reality is that dine-in will take a long time to come back to what it was in, let's say, about 2019. Now, in terms of recovery, there are three views that I would like to tell the companies to be looking at. The first view is the immediate horizon of the next 6 months, and that's going to be all about survival. And it's not necessarily going to be, it will not look good. It's going to look very ugly. It's going to look extremely messy. But I think once you're over the next 6 months, what you're going to be looking at is a period of 6 to 18 months, which I would like to call a period of just trying to adapt to what the new normal could be. The new normal will definitely come. And I just like to, I just thought that in the words of Robert Frost, he said that if you ask me what I've learned about life, I can say it in 3 words: it goes on. Life will go on. There is going to be a return to some kind of normal. It's going to be a new normal, because this continues situations like this definitely step up the playing field. The new normal, and that's what we have tried to sort of articulate in our article, is going to be built on these three specific drivers of digital, health and wellness, and thirdly, innovation. And I think these are going to form the bedrock of the new normal 2 years from now, specifically to the restaurant industry. Already we are starting to see new models in terms of dark kitchens, drive-throughs, delivery, of course. So I think these will start to play a greater role in the future of what the restaurant industry can look like.
Absolutely, and so well said. Life is going to go on, and we have to evolve and adapt accordingly. Friends on the Zoom, we missed a couple of announcements. So we are on Facebook Live of Basecamp Digital's page. So in case you want to be there, you can also view us from there. And the second is, in case you find some logistical challenges and network disruption, We are going to share the Zoom recording of the entire conversation just after the session. All right, coming to our next speaker and author, Indranil Das. Indranil is the Vice President at Ericsson with over 25 years of experience in consulting and IT services. Currently, he's based out of Stockholm, Sweden. Indranil, your space is very interesting because I come from this field. I was reading in the article that you have mentioned 90% of professionals and IT services are now delivered by employees being work from home. How do you see the balance between this work from home and working at office shift post the COVID era?
Thank you, Mohua. Thank you for asking the question. The way I would say, someone told me the other day, very soon we'll have a new lingo. I work from office, because that's the kind of changes you expect going forward, right? And if you look at pre-COVID era, we had hardly 5% working from home full-time basis. Maybe in US a little bit more, 20, 30%, but overall it's less than 5%. Now we have moved to the other end of the spectrum, more than 80, 90% working from home. And are we able to serve our clients? Absolutely, yes, without any big disruption. And that gives new freedom of thinking, right, with the digital workplace. If you see what some of the announcements that are happening now, like Twitter is saying, our employees will not have to come back to office for work. Google is saying till end of the year, they will have their employees working from home. TCS is saying even post-COVID era, they will have 75% of the workforce working from home. Now, do we believe then what we predicted by 2028, 80, 90% will be working from home? Will that be accelerated tremendously from 2020 or 2021 onwards? It would be 80, 90%. I don't think so. I don't think so. I believe it would be gradual, okay? It would be bi-directional to start with. You will see initially, now we are working from home because of the situation, we'll go to office. But depending on the situation, sometimes you have to come back to also working from home. So this will go on for some time. We call it bi-directional movement based on the situation. And then gradually the balance would shift, right? And I believe eventually, okay, if not by 2022, 2023, by 2025 or 2026, you will see more than 75% working from home. And that would be the new normal. With the digital technologies that we have, it will enable. Also, that gives an interesting perspective. Pawanjit, who spoke just before me, I was talking to him the other day, and I saw him working from car. I asked him, "Oh, Pawan, you are going for a grocery?" He said, "No, actually, this is my new workplace." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, it's my new workplace because at home, sometimes you don't get signal. When I go out in my car, I have better signal, and that is new workplace." So that gives a new possibilities, new paradigm. It's like a working from anywhere, right? And that gives new opportunities, really equal employment opportunities. Maybe there will be more people you can include working in professional life then, because you don't have to go to office, you have more flexibility. And that is a new interesting paradigm.
No, thanks. And you know, I can resonate so well because it relates to the work that I do also. In fact, we might also see how the workforce mix is going to change with more gender diversity and also from differently able people. So we would see all those mix and interesting paradigms in the future. Thank you. All right, and we move to our next speaker, Robin Jones. And Robin, fantastic to see you after so long. Robin is the CTO and Managing Director of Scorable, a Berlin-based firm offering AI services in investment banking. Robin has over 2 decades of experience in leadership roles in both Fortune 100 companies and some of the largest fintechs in Europe. So Robin, does this mark an inflection point for the mainstreaming of AI? And so there are three questions, so just note it, right? So the second question, how do you see its adoption curve moving into the next, say, 18 or 24 months? And the third question, any specific industry that you can talk of where you see the adoption is going to be much early than the others?
Thank you, Mahua. That's a great question, and thanks for the opportunity. So there's a few questions in there. Let's deconstruct that a little bit. Question number one, is this an inflection point for AI? Short answer, no. The AI adoption has only one way to go, and that's up. So I don't see an inflection. I see more of an acceleration in terms of adoption. The second question was more like, how do I see the adoption curve? Definitely higher. Why do I say that? A key challenge that's blocking AI adoption is the digital maturity of many businesses. And as industries get more digitized, three key things happen. Number one, they produce more data, and hence the training sets and the accuracy of the AI models and their results improve substantially. Number two, as they're digitized, more automation can come in, and hence these AI insights can actually be put into production, and hence provide much better return of investment. And number three is the virtuous cycle that happens because of one and two. So as we have more data, more accurate AI, and more ability to put this AI insights into production, we will see more and more investment into AI. So it's definitely going to go up in terms of adoption. And I definitely see that it's going to accelerate substantially. Question number three, what are the specific industries where adoption could actually go significantly faster? And honestly, I do not know the right answer to this. I would only be speculating. But having said that, let me go on that conjecture and make some wild predictions. I would definitely go with healthcare as the number one. We always shied away from a full-fledged acceleration of AI in healthcare because there were so many things we were worried about. For example, we said our health data is private and we really don't want to give it to a third party because we don't know what they're going to do with that. And the crisis made us realize that there are ways in which we could provide this data anonymously and benefit from it, such as including increasing our lifespan itself. So the top spot for my prediction in terms of AI adoption is definitely healthcare. Number two would be manufacturing. Again, going back to our story of digitization, manufacturing is a place where I can definitely see highly increased digital adoption and hence more automation and hence more AI. And the third one would be real estate and all adjacencies. So not just traditional builders, but all adjacencies like renting, hospitality, and segments like this.
Yeah, fantastic. In fact, yesterday a news came out. So in this totally dry time, even investors are looking for those promising companies who are working on AI. And there's one company in UK named, I think, Featurespace. They are in the space of behavioral analytics technology, and they got $37 million. So perfectly said. I think a lot of investment are coming through the way of AI. Thank you, Robin. All right, we go to our next speaker, Pritesh Patel, and happy to talk about Pritesh because Pritesh is the founder of Basecamp Digital, and they are organized and they're hosting us today. Pritesh also is the founder of MediaLens. He has 16 years plus experience in the media industry and worked with brands like BCCL, Yahoo, Comly Media, and Facebook. He has trained 1,000 plus professionals and students and also conducted various CXO level trainings in digital marketing. So everybody on the session, you know who's the guru in digital marketing to go to. So now your question to you, Pritesh. So how do you think Indian digital ecosystem would change post-COVID?
Okay, thank you, Mohan. Hello, everyone. What I'll do is I'll answer in two parts. Let me take pre-COVID, right? So pre-COVID, if you see digital ecosystem in terms of media spends and digital was always in an upward trend, right? It was growing. And if you actually see right now, there are around 450 million active users in India who are actually on digital, be it on mobile phone or through desktop. And the overall medium is really moving much fast, right? So digital as a spends number 3. So it's TV, print, and digital, right? So in next 1.5 to 2 years, we're going to cross print. So TV is going to be number one, then digital, and then print. And then by 2023-24, we are expecting digital to be number one in terms of media spend. So the discussion as such, the report says that the digital will even cross TV. So now let me come to the question of post-COVID. Now I will take that into a different way. That I would say, like, let's talk about the current and the post-COVID scenario. And I'll put into three buckets, right? So let's say users, advertisers, and industries. Let me first speak about users. If you see, we are already around 450 million users in India, active users. Because of this COVID scenario, people are already online. They don't have much to do. So that's one of the reasons they're spending online. So more number of users, more time spent, be it on various platforms like your OTT, Netflix, or Amazon Primes of the world, or say YouTube or Facebook, TikTok, the list keeps going on, right? And even like another example of Zoom. So for example, Zoom number of downloads has increased. Right now, what we are doing is something on the same line, right? So at the same way, even your Google Class, your Microsoft Team, the number of spends, I mean, the user downloading has increased, right? So net user perspective is at increase. Not only the office people are coming in the article, we even wrote about learning from home, right? So for example, my daughter is 11-year-old, but she knows how to use Team much better than me, right? So that's one of the opportunities. Then you see online yoga classes happening, online gymming happening. Then even people are creating online content, be it a recipe video or something. So net from a user perspective, it's definitely an upward trend, which will continually keep going on. Now let me come back to the advertiser side, right? Currently, yes, the advertising spend has gone down substantially to a certain extent, but there are industries like gaming, OTT, essential goods. Those are the kind of people are really spending. FMCG are really spending in the current scenario, though the spends are down. But the moment the lockdown opens, non-essential stuff starts happening, being sold out, I'm seeing the brand gradually moving up, right? And one of the things which I really speak to a lot of my friends is, like, if you call up and say, I need an ITC ATA, and the guy says that the ITC ATA is not available, the next thing what a consumer will say, send any ATA which is available, right? So over a period of time, brand loyalty is getting shifted. Now my wife likes some other ATA, but not going for a particular brand. So there is a lot of opportunity for an SMB also to put their brand out there, because consumers have tried, tested it, the number shows to them. So again, digital is the way for them because there is less clutter. And the third part, which is industries. When you talk about industries, there are various industries. As Robin said, there is healthcare, it's going to grow. Then you got talk about online education, it's really going to be really big. And when I say online education, is from live session from one to many, right? That's itself is going to be a big opportunity. Then you talk about gaming platform, any platform related to digital, be your wallets of the world, your healthcare, your insurance. And very interesting is the exhibition industry, right? So normally what we used to see pre-COVID is we used to go for exhibition, be it an auto exhibition or real estate exhibition. But now what is happening is the customers are not ready to go for any kind of exhibition in future, right? So then the entire exhibition is getting virtual. So that again is getting into a digital end. So net, the overall industry is really growing in a big way.
Yeah, fantastic. Because, I am in the space where online education is part of it, but for professionals. And we are seeing so much of surge where organizations today are rethinking on their entire L&D space, because not a lot of trainings can happen in-house. So how do they kind of take alternatives through online training?
You're bang on. In fact, a lot of companies have reached out for virtual training. Now they open. Earlier they were not ready, saying the training needs to be in person, but now they've opened it for virtual training. So you're bang on it.
Yeah. All right. So we now move on to our next speaker, Vaijayanti Mala Belsare. Vaijayanti is a partner assurance services in a multinational accounting firm, BDO. She's a chartered accountant and has served several multinational and Indian corporates across industries over 2 decades. Vaijayanti, professional services businesses largely depends on how well the other businesses or industries are doing, right? So how do you think COVID-19 situation has affected professional services businesses, and what challenges are they facing, and what's the way forward?
Yeah, thank you, Mawa. It's a very good question. 3 questions you actually have posed. What's the impact of the COVID situation currently on the professional services firms' revenues or the business? What are the challenges, and what's the way forward? So professional services industry is really impacted very badly. It's a very tough situation for us at this point of time. You'll imagine that due to the lockdown everywhere, the production of goods and services is literally come at a zero level. And because of the overall economic activity has reduced so much, there is a lot of pressure on the level of engagements that we have with our clients. A lot of engagements have got postponed indefinitely. A lot of engagements may get cancelled. There are a lot of pressure on fees. So the very, very primary thing and the very direct impact that we have is on our revenues. Today, we can say that at least 20 to 25% of revenues have been hit, where our budgets have undergone a change. The second immediate impact is on the cash flows. As the revenues of the industry are impacted, definitely they are trying to save costs. And the first that, the vendor that gets impacted is the professional services firms. So they try to renegotiate contracts, change the rates, reduce the rates, and defer the payments. So our fees get deferred, as a result of which our cash flows get impacted severely. That's the second impact. The third impact actually is on our costs. Because we don't have revenues and because cash flows are deferred, what we try to do is save on costs. Save on cost can be possible only to a certain extent, because our key resources are our manpower resource, which are highly trained professionals and trainees basically, who are learning. What happens is that you have to keep them engaged, you have to keep them motivated, and to continue to give services, quality services, ensure the quality of services, you have to actually ensure that your best talent is retained. So it's like a circus or a tightrope walking for professional services firms. So all these are challenges. One of the other key challenges that is coming up is, how do you secure your information databases? Because we have a lot of clients, operational as well as financial information, which is absolutely confidential on our databases, on our emails. We deal with it on a daily basis, and how do you protect that? That's another thing which has put a lot of pressure on our costs at this point of time. However, the way forward is to, as all the other speakers have also reiterated, is to go digital. So invest in digital database sharing platforms, information sharing platforms, meeting platforms, and ensure that your work goes on. As I think Indranil said, that life goes on. So you have to, and certain services that are mandatory by law, I mean, the deadlines don't change. Even if there is a lockdown, even if there is whatever, the client is not working, our deadlines don't change. We have to report, like statutory audit services. So we are investing in digital, we are investing in IT platforms, and we are ensuring that, our work doesn't stop. Having said that, it's very difficult to perform services, maybe advisory services, consulting services, audit services, sitting at home. I mean, it's 95 to 99% working from home now, but you have to have client interaction, face-to-face interaction, to understand certain decisions, strategic decisions taken by the client. What is the rationale? What are they going to do ahead? And some of the issues that we keep on discussing with the clients. So we really hope that in the next 4 to 5 months, things actually come to at least little normal, so that we can start our regular interactions with the client and not only work from home. So let's just, fingers crossed.
Thanks, Vaijayanti. I think the information security part is very, very important and needs a lot of due diligence. Thank you for your insights. Our next speaker is Pramod Dwivedi. He is the president of Ambuja Neotia Group in the real estate division. Pramod has over 2 decades of experience in real estate across, in fact, residential, retail, commercial, leisure homes, and cement industry. And yours is one of the most interesting sectors. I'm really looking forward to your response, Pramod. So in your opinion, what are the long-term impacts on the commercial real estate sector?
Thank you, Mawa. If I were to go by what Indranil said, then I'll have to close down my business itself. But I see it in a different way. What I see is that in the short term, the new office demand is certainly going to go down by 25 to 35%. But in the long run, I don't see this dip beyond 10%, even if there is a shift of work from home beyond 50%. And there are a few reasons for that. The first reason is that if you see this in India, the major office occupiers are IT, ITS industry. And in that industry, the rent to revenue ratio varies from 1 to 2.5%, which means there is not much cost arbitrage in it. Just to give you the perspective, in case of retail real estate, this varies from 10 to 25%, except the hypermarket, which is at 4%. So if you compare with this cost benefit and the quality compromise, which the employer will have to do, so finally the quality compromise will not be acceptable once we move to the new normal post-COVID. And all of us will agree that if you were to compare by the output and the efficiency by working from home and working with team in office, there is going to be some compromise. And post-COVID, this compromise may not be acceptable. And the second reason is the hygiene aspect of it. If you see around the lemon crisis, we noticed that in India, this density was around 100 square feet per person in office, which came down in the last 12 years. It has come to 50 square feet per person. I again see that moving towards 100 over a period of time. So the set off, which Indranil is talking about, the shift to work from home, will be absorbed by this increase in the decrease in the density. Having said that, and the last but not the least is the most important part, is that there will be new demand of moving to new office space. In the sense, the modern buildings where you are being thermally scanned and the lift and all that, the distance is being maintained, HVAC quality is such that it is being screened properly. So these things will be taken care of. And the new demand, I personally feel that the resilience shown by this ITS industry by working from home, they have operated at more than 90% efficiency. There are several countries which we could not do. So globally, the credibility of Indian IT industry is further strengthened. So I see more business coming to India, to Indranil, Indian business in the time to come. So overall, I don't see much impact in the commercial office segment. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. We'll see what time comes in. Okay, so we go to our next speaker now, Rajni Kasu. She is the CEO of Zippy's. It's first of its kind in India, the car rental marketplace. Rajni has over 2 decades of experience in technology, telecom, consulting, and logistics. Again, very interesting sector, Rajni. So how do you see the impact on the travel industry and shared mobility space, especially considering the current health and wellness aspect that people are very keen on?
Thanks, Mahua, and thanks for taking me in then so that I can construct my responses based on my previous panelist's response. Yeah, so the definition of norm has totally changed in the past, 60 days. The norm that we looked at in the past pre-COVID, and now if the government comes and opens up, things are very different. When I say very different, at a macro level and a micro level, things are very different. So once the government comes and opens the travel industry, which is at ground zero right now, the demand is not going to surge right away. It's going to be pretty low. So for the existing demand, what are a few things that you're supposed to do? The first thing is, how innovative are you with your marketing and with your packages structure in the travel industry? Would you want to waive the cancellation fee, and what are a few things that you would do around that? And even the incentives from the government for the airline industry, we got to see how that's going to benefit the consumer as well. That's more at a macro level. And when you come at a micro level, the customer persona or the customer confidence is at the lowest that you see when they go out. So there's a lot of ambiguity about the cleanliness, the sanitation that's maintained out over there. So to gain the consumer confidence across, there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be put in. So the proper measures need to be taken out over there, and it's very pivotal for any business out over there. The sanitation, the cleanliness, making sure the hygiene is followed, everything. Earlier that was not a norm, but washing hand is a norm right now. So every 5-10 minutes, everybody started washing their hands. So overall, what we look at is a zero-touch approach, what Pavanjit has articulated. And we wouldn't want many touch points where there is a chance of spreading of the virus, and more of validations related to the biometric thing at every touch points, and more of understanding the customers and the partners in this industry. When I say customers and partners, See, the reality on the ground is very different. So there are few people who have been tested positive who could recover. They're coming back to work and they're, starting their work again. So how do you differentiate them? What is a norm for them? How do you put things across to make sure they come back to work and they still are secured and everybody's secured around? So how do you differentiate that from that? And when some product is being consumed from them, what are the few norms that you got to follow if a product is being dispatched from a previously positive COVID positive person? What are few things that you're supposed to do? So there's certain processes that need to be put it across the chain. And in this industry, you would have a detailed safety route where it would say where are the red zones, orange zones, to make sure that you maneuver through the where you avoid all the red zones out over there. And as Vaijayanti has put it across, privacy is very critical. Data privacy is very critical because there's a lot of information that we are going to seek, as Robin said, because the products that you're going to give to the consumer needs to be more personalized. You got to figure out what products to give it to the customer. So there's a lot of data that you got to curate, understand the data, and give the related product. And the organizations which are understanding the impact and going to implement an agile model are going to survive. So you got to know what is happening on the ground. How are the partners behaving in this industry? How are the customers behaving in this industry? In a car, how many would want to travel? So earlier, if it is Innova, 7 people would want to travel. Would that be going to be a norm in the future? Absolutely not. What would the norm be? What are few things that you got to follow over there? And also what we have seen is, and some of them we actually implemented at Zippy's as we speak. So the other thing that we see picking up is EV. The EV was picking up and not an accelerated rate. But post-COVID, we are hoping that the EV adoption is much faster than what we have seen in the past. One is because there's a lot of push for reducing the carbon footprint out over there to make sure that we don't see such scenarios in the future. So there's a lot of the proactive approach from all the industries across. And the other thing that we are seeing is in the shared economy, carpool is going to slow down a little bit right now because the customers wouldn't want to travel with somebody whom you don't know about. So even when the passenger is getting into a car, we would want to know the history of the passenger using the Arogya Setu app. Where he has been, was he tested positive, how long he has been, if he has been quarantined, when did he get quarantined, the whole history of that particular passenger, so that the partner is safe and secure. When I say partner, the driver is safe and secure. And it works the other way around as well. So in that way, when there's so much ambiguity around, the self-drive is going to pick up because you wouldn't have a driver where you have many questions around it. So the self-drive, all the millennials actually have adopted to the self-drive, but this particular, the COVID would accelerate that process as well, where a lot of them would want to come and, hire a cab and drive around. And what we are seeing is there are a lot of, small travel agents who are suffering, with the COVID lockdown. So what Zippy's has done is that we have brought all of them onto the platform, and it's very pivotal to take care of these small industries as well. Small, some small travel agents, you can't let them crash. If there is an opportunity, because the customer confidence comes from a local guy, and how do you put, stitch everything together with your technology, with your, understanding the customer persona, relating to the right product, all those things you have to put it into the common platform and do it. So at the same time, we launched something called COVID Sati, which actually gave us a human intent on the ground, more on the, as you rightly put it, across the mental wellness of a customer. What are they thinking? What are few things that they are going through, and how should the product shape around? So that has given quite a bit of insight to, to relate those grievances that the customers are going through and embed into the product. So before I end my answer to your question, Mahua, one thing I would like to emphasize is empathy is very critical for any product across. So be it at the beginning or in the end. When I say beginning, be it on the supply side or on the demand side, empathy has to get reflected at every point. So how it can be, integrating the technology, having the processes in place, audit mechanism, training, be it anything out over there. But the product needs to have that embedded into it. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Rajni, and great. I mean, great to hear all your point of views. I think we have little more than 20 minutes left for the session, and we are now opening for your questions. And I see a lot of questions lined up on the Q&A section. So others, if you want to ask your questions, please put it under Q&A.
No, sorry to cut you, but I guess there are a lot of questions coming on the Zoom chats also. Maybe you can refer that also.
All right.
Not a question on Zoom chat, yeah.
I think we should take the one in the Q&A first and then take the Zoom chat. Is that okay? Or
that's fair. I mean, yeah, we can just pick and choose because a lot of common questions we might just kind of, optimize on that. So there's one which I believe, Robin, you can take. Or will we see an increase in the adoption of cashless payments? The reason I told Robin, because you come from fintech.
The short answer is yes. In fact, I think ever since the demonetization, we have seen a substantial increase in terms of cashless payments and how it's accepted across India. It doesn't necessarily have to be because of the COVID crisis. And it's only going to go up because more and more people are definitely going to see the benefits along with that. It's also a question of capabilities and the digitization of even the Kirana stores, how they're going to accept cashless payments. But I would also recommend, Pritesh, would you like to add something to it?
Yeah, as you rightly said, I'm just to add 2 points saying that yes, not only even all the Kirana stores, even the hawkers, everyone have right now started going cashless. So definitely a big up for a cashless economy.
All right, great.
If I can just add one point over here, because this is quite relevant to restaurants as well. You know, when you've got business models such as cashless, they've been around for about 2-3 years at least in various forms. I think one important thing to always remember is that when it comes to innovation, it's development of an ecosystem which is really going to accelerate adoption. And what you're seeing right now is that, and sometimes that ecosystem development happens by force. And I think one of the things that we are going to see out of this situation is that by force, the development of ecosystem around things like cashless is suddenly going to increase. And so that's going to accelerate adoption of cashless. What I'll be keen to really see is things like which are truly touchless. So at the moment, you still got to touch your phone or to touch the keypad in the EDC machine and all of those things. Right. So I think there's plenty of room still for innovation, but this is definitely going to accelerate the complete adoption of these things.
Super. All right. The next question I would first ask Pritesh, and then others can pick up. Will advertising become a must for all businesses?
Yes, in a way, but I would say not necessarily. That means you have to spend a lot of money. It can be even by spending a very small penny on a WhatsApp messages or by any other. So not necessarily you have to put in a big way, but advertising in any form will definitely help. And just to add here, the way, obviously I'm from digital, so I would definitely advise it, saying that digital is one platform which makes all the companies on the same line, right? So for example, as a company, if I want to advertise on TV, yes, I want to, but can I? No, I cannot, because that cost me a lot of money. So that's where I, as a very small advertiser, can compete with one of the biggest brand and advertise and get my audience see my ad. So technically, yeah, advertising always helps. Not necessary, but it always helps. Yeah.
All right. Any other point of view, or can we move on to the next question? Seems like we can move on. So this question is directed to you, Indranil. Can telcos like Airtel and Vodafone expect higher ARPU post-COVID following the current trend, or is it going to go back to what it was pre-COVID era?
Interesting question. So I'll just give you an example. I was talking to someone few days back. That person said till February, that person had 100 GB of quota of data, consumption quota by the operator given, right, per month. Usage was hardly 10 GB. Okay. Come March or April, it has become 100 GB consumed within not only first 20 days, they need more. The question here is, we are consuming 10 times. Are we going to pay 10 times to the operators? Perhaps not. Actually, it is going to put more strain on operators' business, infrastructure, and they have to be much more efficient. I think Pavanjit talked about no touch or low touch. We call it zero touch automation, AI-driven approach, automation. That we have to help the operators to go for much more efficiency and efficacy, right? They cannot just do a linear curve in terms of, it will not be a linear curve of ARPU increase, neither it will be a neat linear curve in terms of servicing all the requests, right? So we need to bring more automation into everything we do today.
Great, thanks. The next question I think I'll open and you all can pick and choose who wants to respond. This is agnostic of industry. What impact do you expect this crisis to have on the global job market, irrespective of the domain? Anybody want to pick it up?
Yeah, I'd let me just have a small take at it. Look, there is already, we are seeing that there's been a very sad fallout in terms of job losses across sectors. And I think that trend is going to continue for at least some time. But I think in the long run, like I said earlier, there is going to be a new normal. What that is I think something which is too far away yet. It's still a very sort of hazy future. But as we get closer to it, we will start to see new competencies which will start to come up in terms of demand. And so I am quite optimistic in terms of the job situation, at least, let's say about 24 months out. At the moment and for the next 18 months, maybe it's going to be hard.
Okay. So let me give the response from the startup ecosystem. So right now it is more of sustaining. So we don't have much options for expansion or experimenting anything right now. So most of the organizations are, letting go people for many reasons. One of the strong reasons is how would you sustain in the long run? For the next 24 months, you have to make sure your core business is running and all the challenges related to your core business are well addressed. So as Pavanjit has put it across, it's going to that period, maybe 12 months or 24 months, but as an organization, we should be prepared for that. Yes, in short period, there's going to be an impact, but the new business models, new avenues, new products would evolve during this period. And that's when the job market and the job opportunities are going to pick up.
Right.
Just a word over here, Mahua, about empathy. I think we're already seeing that companies are handling it in a very different way. So for example, on one extreme, you got somebody like an Airbnb who's done it in a very elegant way, if that's a way to do it at all. And then on the absolute opposite end of that spectrum, you've got somebody like for example, Uber, right? So I think the way that companies handle this is going to be extremely important, not just for the people who are losing their jobs right now, but also for the companies themselves going forward. I think that is going to be extremely important for their own future and how they are viewed 24 months from now.
Great. I think I'll ask the next question. This is again industry agnostic. It is anyone's best guess, but Pramod, we can start with you. How much time will businesses take to come back to normalcy?
First of all, the main timing will depend on the medicine and the vaccine, by when we are going to get it. Suppose we expect the medicine, we are able to get the medicine in the next 6 to 9 months. Then after that, again, you add just 8 to 9 more months, then you'll be start seeing a V-shaped recovery. However, if the vaccination comes after 12 to 18 months, then the recovery would be faster because people will have peace of mind and people have seen this kind of business and people would be able to take more and more risk and people will be wanting to go back to the old normal, obviously with a lot of innovations.
Mm-hmm. Right. Vaijayanti, would you want to add on to this?
Mahua, can you repeat the question? I just lost the connection in between.
It is, how do you see, from a business normalcy to come back? How soon will it come back or how much time is it going to take?
So I just want to add to what Pramod said, that depending on the medicines and the vaccine, it will all depend how soon the lockdown period will get probably done away with, or things will start to get normalized. However, I see that a lot of industries will have to start their operations in some way or the other to sustain. So you just can't, you can imagine your own life just with, basic necessities of life fulfilled, like, milk, vegetables, and, maybe fruits and some whatever medicines and all that. It can't go on for much longer than maybe another 4 to 5 months. So I think slowly, the things will have to be, picked up. Government will have to relax the norms in maybe couple of months. And also, I feel the India kind of countries, which are still developing countries, have a huge unorganized sector or huge population that actually thrives on, these small businesses, small activities for their living. And in some way or the other, I think they'll have to start this activity. So I would say maybe next 6 to 8 months time, I think the things will have to start getting normalized.
I'll just add here, Mahua, just a small thing. Like if you see, initially India was having in number of cases and the number of deaths, it was around 3 to 3.3%. In the last few weeks, we have seen the death percentage to be around 2.5% overall. But in India, a lot of asymptomatic cases are there, which means the actual real case would be much, maybe 2-3 times higher than that. And but death number, let's see, will be close to what it is actually, what is being shown. If you see that way, then the overall death percentage is going to be less than 1%. So people will finally realize that the death percentage ratio is going to be so low, with some precaution and all that, people will start moving back to the normal by taking certain precaution and risk.
Great. I think it leads to our next question. And Robin, I would request you to respond to this. Will more people invest in life or health insurances? How can this impact the insurance industries? I don't want to put you on spot, but since Korbal is on the insurance tech company.
Sure, happy to take this call. Happy to take this question. This is actually something I've focused a lot on the past few years as part of VFox as well, which is one of the largest insurtechs in Europe. So now to answer that question, India traditionally is a country with very low insurance coverage. And this is mostly because we always counterweigh the cost of insurance against the benefits and say, maybe I don't need that. Maybe I don't need to pay that money. Take, for example, healthcare. It should not be surprising to us that a majority of the population is not covered by a dedicated health insurance. In fact, most employees still use the insurance provided by the employers. I mean, this is not surprising. And me too, at some point of time, had only the insurance provided by my company. I didn't have any other insurance. But most countries, if you look at it, developed nations, they have mandatory health insurance that has to be taken. So the short answer to this is that, yes, when they counterweigh the cost versus benefit, there's going to be a mind shift, and people are going to definitely appreciate paying that money for the insurance, for the benefit that it brings. But all is not bad. I mean, one of the best things I want to highlight, especially in terms of India, is we are surprisingly digitized when it comes to insurance. And this is a very, very positive thing. Take, any kind of insurance that you can think of. We can go to Policy Bazaar or any other aggregate sites and actually have that insurance 100% digitized and available to us in just a matter of 1 or 2 days. And this is not something that a lot of developed countries do not have right now. In fact, when I was working with VFox, we had this major challenge in Switzerland and even in Germany, where most of the regular life and health insurances have to be still done by the traditional document way, where people have to sign it up, send it to you, you scan it, you try to digitize the document. So overall, we have an ecosystem which is surprisingly digital, and this is a great thing, but we don't have as much coverage. And my feeling is that under the current circumstances, this would change as people would appreciate insurance and the benefits more and more. Thank you.
Thanks. So people on the call, we still have 7 or 8 minutes to go and a lot of unanswered questions. So we'll go one by one, but please keep sending down your questions. The next one, Pavanjit, it's going to be for you. At this point, while restaurant industry is down with orders, and sorry, I just missed the question. Yeah, and a lot of them are getting into offers like 50% discount. which impacts the business model, of course, and the price, it gets into price war. So do you think, is it the right approach? And what are your thoughts on it?
Look, there are two ways to this. The first way is that even if you look at 2019 and before, there were companies in the food space who were already doing discounting of some sort or the other. Now that goes down, and that goes back to the heart of that company and that brand. If that brand is built along a value chain which can support discounting, great, that's the way for them. But not all are, right? Now, if you move down to this situation and you see brands using that as a tool to get more people into order, I think, like I said earlier, the next 6 months is going to be extremely ugly, right? So there is unfortunately no playbook that at least the food companies are used to, right? The food companies are used to a playbook of an economic recession that they know how to handle. But they do not know how to handle both this supply side shock as well as demand side shock. I think that is something that is going to be ugly. There are going to be some very interesting business models that are going to sort of emerge out of this. And whether discounting is something that supports them in the short term, so be it. Right. There is no right answer over there for that.
Got it. The next one is in a very different industry, and I saw that it was to Pritesh. Yes, to Pritesh. When do you see movies being premiered on digital? So when will digital replace the entire TV and print as primary advertisement medium?
Two questions. So I'll answer the second one first. So it's not about replacing. Obviously, digital will be number 2 and print will be number 2 or number 3, or TV will be number 2. So it's very critical to understand that they all will work together, right? You cannot just survive on one. So I'm not saying that we can only survive on TV or a print or a digital. There needs to be a combination on both. So that's really important. To answer the first question is premium of OTT is already started. I read it in news today in one of the newspaper that there are how many people will, because cinema industry is going to be impacted the most, right? Because I have a choice not to go, and last 30 days, 70 days, we are at home 60 days, and we are in our own comfort watching movie on Netflix on our own screen. Why should I take risk myself and go out? So that's exactly what all the cinema guys are also realizing, and that's the reason there is premium of OTT movies on OTT is also started. So there will be a combination going forward in future. There will be premium on OTT as well as in movie cinemas.
Got it. Now the next question is, I think Rajni, you can take, and from business perspective also others can take. What will be the impact of the travel restrictions that's on all the businesses? So you're in the core travel business, Rajni, so you can take it up and maybe others can chip in.
Yeah, sure. No. So the travel industry has taken among all the industries, it's taken a humongous hit across. One of the dynamics that we are not clear yet is, we had requests where a customer has to travel to a tier 3 city, but the driver goes till there, but the villages wouldn't allow them to come in. So how do you actually understand the whole dynamics, what's happening out over there? So the critical factor is understanding the ground reality, what is happening in tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. As we speak, the lockdown is getting extended, the new policies are coming in, understanding what's happening. So the demand is very low. The demand which is, the request that we are coming is only for an emergency, or somebody wants to move from one location to another. So during these times, it's very, very critical to understand what these requests are and can we adhere to it or not. To understand that the information, we don't have too much information to know even if the tier 3 city would allow the customer to get dropped out over there or not. So you have to understand the whole dynamics of it, right from the point we pick the customer to where he gets dropped. The travel industry is going to take a bigger hit in the future. Even be it in the airlines, where we have 3 seats, we are allowing only 2 of them with certain distance out over there. Be it in buses and even in the cars, we are not going to allow more than 3 people max in the future, and with certain restrictions out over there. And if it is a longer distance, would the same car be allowed traveling 1,000 kilometers? Would that be okay, or should something come around there? And, and COVID is, there's so much speculation around over there that there's going to be, the next round, or we don't know what few things are going to adhere. So what are few, processes that we got to implement? I would say methods and procedures that we got to implement, even though God forbidden it happens. What are few things that we make it as a norm in the travel industry per se? Because we can't stop it all. We can't go to ground zero again. There has to be certain things that we have to come out, be more innovative, construct in such a way so that when a trip, when you get a request, can we adhere to the request or not? Get all the information together, understand the red zones, green zones, orange zones, understand the consumer, understand the other, understand the dynamics of the driver. Can we send them together? So all the end-to-end spectrum of getting every vertical, every user, every information is very important to make a decision. Right. Yes, it is going to, you will see a lot of changes coming in, but it has to move on.
All right, thank you. I think we are just on time, but we'll just take the last question. I know a
Moa,
lot of questions are unanswered. Yeah,
Moa, sorry to interrupt. I believe there's a question for you from Southrick. How COVID situation shall be opening new horizon to the disabled section of society in terms of job security in India? I know you are very passionate about it.
Yeah, so Shavik, so it is two ways. One is disabled and gender. So I'm passionate about both. So I think when the COVID comes in, and if you've seen the statistics that Indranil gave through his pitch, that how Twitter, TCS, and other tech companies, I can only talk about tech companies as of now because that's where you can do a lot of work from home. So if you have the competence and the talent and the skill to do it, doesn't matter where you work from, you should be able to contribute and be part of the workforce. I think people will be more agile and be acceptance in terms of not ensuring people coming to office. So you can be at your home, just ensure whoever it is, they have to be reskilling themselves and making them competent to be part of the workforce. Organizations will be ready to hire if they find the right match, irrespective of gender, irrespective of differently ability. So I think that would be my short answer. I know we are off the time.
Noah, just one last point to the work from, because I saw a lot of comments related to that, and Indranil also mentioned work from home. So we are seeing one side of work from home, right? Let's talk about another side. Like for example, productivity of people. I mean, from a company perspective, productivity is increasing, which is great for the company. Second is, what about the employees? Like people are expected to be available any time of the day, because I talk to my friends and all of us are in the same rut, right? Saying that 8:30 it starts, it's end at 10 o'clock, 9 o'clock. I mean, don't even know, 1 o'clock. There is no working. So the new lunch hours is around 6 o'clock or 4 o'clock for a lot of people. So that's one side. The other side, if we go for work from home, and technically will require less office, maybe Indranil, if you can also help me answer. What will happen is, just see the impact on the other industry is going to happen. A, commercial industry in terms of office space. B, catering industry, because big companies like TCS and all have paid huge amount of money on catering. So there are people working for that. Then housekeeping people, right? So there's so much amount of people, workforce, blue collar kind of people. Transportations, Olas, Ubers will go down because I'm not going to travel, I'm going to work from home. So net, even technically, if you talk about the hygiene industry, all your tissues and everything from a CPG industry, all will have a big impact, and especially the blue collar. So maybe I just thought I'll put my perspective.
And Pritesh, sorry to jump in here very quickly. I think the other aspect is the psychological impact on the employees, right? And there's a lot of questions around that. Yeah, because today, like when you are in office, what happens? You go have a chit chat, right? During like a break or coffee machine in the lobby, you miss it today. Right? So we are all kind of in meetings, in Zoom meeting, in video meeting, one from another. We don't have those outlets. So psychological impact going forward would become very, very large. And I see many of the companies already started talking about it openly, starting to talk and also even train their managers and leaders how to cope with that. And that's going to be extremely important.
I'll just add one thing to what Pritesh said, that everything is going to get down. But I positively think, which I see, is that residential real estate is going to go up, because the most extensively used product during this COVID period, it was your own home. Okay? Right. And what everybody felt was the need for extra space for work from home, extra space for learn from home, space for, your utility space for your helps to stay, large balconies, large opening in the sense so that there is good cross ventilation. The millennials who never used to, believe in that owning home will start believing in that they should have their own private place. They will start owning home now.
Right, right. And thank you for amazing perspectives, all of you. I know there are loads of questions we have not been able to answer, but viewers who are on the call, one, you will get the recording from Basecamp Digital. Number two, you know all of them, their names are there. Please reach out to them through LinkedIn if you have specific industry related questions. And the authors of the article, I think you have got a lot more questions. You should release your version 2.0 of the article, and looking forward to the next webinar. So thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot, Basecamp Digital, for hosting and making it happen. And this could not have been possible with so many of you being so engaged and staying till the end and being part of the conversation. Thank you, everybody. Had a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.